say about this offer, as she absolutely slammed it. This is what Breanna Stewart had to say, man. Time is of the essence. Stewart added that she doesn't know if there's a drop dead date, at which point the league will no longer be able to start the season on time if there's no CBA in place. However, she made it clear that everyone knows they're running out of time and need to get a deal done soon. I think that both sides are very aware that this has gone on way longer than it needed to, Stewart said, but hopefully we can really start hearing.
There is a specific sound that accompanies high-stakes labor negotiations when they hit an impasse. It is not loud, it is not dramatic. It is the quiet, unmistakable thud of momentum dying. That is precisely what transpired when WNBPA Vice President Brianna Stewart addressed the league's latest collective bargaining agreement proposal. Her words were measured, her tone was restrained, but her message was devastating. Time is of the essence, Stewart said. She added that she doesn't know if there's a drop-dead date, at which point the league will no longer be able to start the season on time if no CBA is in place. However, she made it crystal clear that everyone knows they're running out of runway. I think that both sides are very aware that this has gone on way longer than it needed to, Stewart continued. But hopefully we can...
Man, oh man, it appears these WNBA players, they are nuts. They are absolutely insane, and they are continuing to try to play hardball with these WNBA owners in regards to the latest CBA offer made by the owners. Breanna Stewart absolutely slapped around that last offer. Denied. We have to get into it. Welcome to Keep the Vision. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share the channel, hit that bell notification to hype the video for me as well. It will be greatly appreciated. Now, we continue to follow what
can really start hearing each other. That last phrase, start hearing each other, is the kind of language negotiators use when they mean the exact opposite. It is diplomatic code for you are not listening to what actually matters. And what actually matters, according to Stewart and the WNBPA leadership, is not the housing concessions the league finally offered. It is not the dramatically increased salary cap figures. It is not the facility upgrades, or the minimum salary increases, or the expanded max contract eligibility. What matters is revenue sharing. Everything else, in Stewart's framing, is window dressing. The owners threw in one-bedroom apartments for first-year players. They raised the salary cap to $5.65 million for 2026. They proposed maximum salaries approaching $2 million by the end of the deal. Minimum salaries jumping from roughly $60,000 to $230,000. Average salaries starting at $530,000. These are not trivial concessions. These are transformative financial upgrades that would make WNBA players among the highest paid women's teams.
Large contingent of WNBA players is a key point. There's a large contingent of WNBA players playing in Athletes Unlimited, not Unrivaled, not Project B. They're not making a bunch of money right now playing basketball in Athletes Unlimited. This is just to get some conditioning, get some 5-on-5 in, and things of that nature. This is not something where you are going to fatten your pockets. So ultimately, the players in this league, these are those middle of the pack players who seem to be getting left out in thought by the veterans, the Nneka Ogwumike's, the Breanna Stewart's, the Napheesa Collier's, who are all compromised but also can afford a lockout. These players, majority of these players in Athletes Unlimited, cannot afford a
sport athletes on the planet. And Stewart's response, delivered with the measured frustration of someone who has heard this pitch before and finds it insufficient, was essentially, thanks, but no thanks. We want our cut of the revenue pie. Everything else is just trinkets and keychains. This is not posturing. This is not negotiation theater. This is a fundamental philosophical disagreement about how professional basketball should be structured in 2025. And with training camp scheduled to begin in less than 3 months, both sides are rapidly running out of time, space, and goodwill. To understand why this negotiation has reached such a dangerous inflection point, one must first understand the rhythm or lack thereof of the communication between the two sides. The NBA owners sent their latest proposal on a Friday. That proposal arrived more than 6 weeks after the
and a bunch of Australian players who said they could not afford a WNBA lockout, and that's not what they wanted. I been knew y'all wasn't on the same page. Here it says, the WNBA's proposal, the league's first response to the players' latest offer, which came more than 6 weeks ago, didn't move much money-wise, Stewart said, but there were some minimum standard requirements that did come into play. That was important, Stewart added, because that means that the league heard us on things that matter to us. And it also means that the league and the owners have been willing to compromise. We are still waiting to hear what you players have compromised on. We haven't heard it yet. Notably, the league's latest proposal offered concessions on player housing and facility standards. First-year players and players on minimum salary will be provided a one-bedroom apartment for the first 3 years of the CBA while the
players had submitted their last offer. 6 weeks is not the pace of productive negotiation. 6 weeks is the pace of two sides digging trenches, fortifying positions, and preparing for prolonged combat. The Players' Executive Committee held an emergency call on Sunday to discuss the league's response. According to sources familiar with the call, the first order of business was not analyzing the specific terms of the offer itself. It was getting everyone on the same page about what they are even asking for. That detail is far more revealing than any specific dollar figure or contractual provision. It suggests that the united front the WNBPA has been projecting since December is showing cracks. It suggests that not every player understands or agrees with the strategic decisions being made by their leadership. Stewart characterized the league's proposal as one that didn't move much money-wise, but that characterization requires significant unpacking. The proposal did move money. It moved substantial amounts of money. What it did not move was the percentage-based revenue sharing structure the players have identified as their primary objective. The owners increased total compensation dramatically. They refused to tie that compensation to a fixed percentage of league revenue. Those are two very different things, and conflating them obscures what is actually happening in these negotiations. Let us examine the league's proposal with the specificity it deserves, because the phrase "didn't move much money-wise" does a significant disservice to the actual numbers on the table.
However, the league's response did not address the gap between the sides on revenue sharing, though it did raise the salary cap to $5.65 million in 2026. A source familiar with the negotiation told CBS Sports how that rise would affect specific salaries is unclear. The WNBA's proposal in early December offered a $5 million salary cap and a max salary of about $1.3 million in the first year of the deal. A source close to the situation told CBS Sports that over the course of the proposed deal, the maximum salary will raise to almost $2 million, and that multiple players on each team will be eligible for the max salary. The minimum salary in this deal will start at $230,000. The average will start at $530,000. Now,
housing concessions. The league has agreed to provide one-bedroom apartments for first-year players and those earning the minimum salary for the first 3 years of the CBA. Developmental players would receive studio apartments. This is not a minor concession. The league has historically resisted continuing to provide housing benefits at all, viewing it as an unsustainable expense in a business model that has only recently approached break-even status. The fact that owners agreed to not only continue housing provisions, but to formalize and expand them represents genuine movement. Salary cap projections. The salary cap rises to $5.65 million in 2026. This represents a substantial increase over previous proposals and an astronomical leap from the current financial structure. For context, the league's proposal in early December offered a $5 million salary cap. The new proposal adds another $650,000 in available spending per team in the first year alone. Maximum salary structure. Maximum salaries would climb to
things that are non-negotiables. What are the non-negotiables? For them, it has been revenue sharing. They want 30% of revenue share. The WNBA is refusing to move on that. This is what you have to pay attention to in this entire thing. Right here. Right there. Revenue sharing. The owners have compromised on many, many things. We haven't seen anything the players have compromised on. The one thing the owners have stayed steady on is revenue sharing. We cannot go up to 30%. We absolutely will not. In fact, we can't go above this 15, but we are giving everyone more money. We are going to continue to pay for you guys' housing, which we didn't want to do. We're going to give on a lot of things. Breanna Stewart absolutely slammed that offer and basically said, look, all of that, the housing, all of the little things, yeah, that's cool. I don't care about keychains and trinkets. We care about revenue share. And therefore, this deal.
Approximately $1.3 million in year one of the new deal. By the end of the proposed contract, max salaries would reach nearly $2 million. Multiple players per team would become eligible for these maximum contracts. Under the current CBA, the maximum salary is roughly $240,000. We are discussing a more than five-fold increase in what the league's best players can earn. Minimum and average salaries. The minimum salary would start at $230,000. The average salary would start at $530,000. The current minimum is approximately $60,000. A player earning the league minimum under the proposed deal would make nearly 4 times what they make now. An average player would see their compensation increase by hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. These are not token gestures. These are transformative raises that would fundamentally alter the economic reality of being a WNBA player. A rookie fighting for a roster spot would no longer be scraping by on $60,000 while trying to secure off-season income overseas. A veteran role player would no longer be balancing WNBA commitments with winter league contracts in Russia or Turkey just to make ends meet. A star player would be earning compensation that places them in the same financial conversation as professional athletes in other major sports leagues. And yet, Stewart characterized this offer as insufficient because it did not address the revenue sharing gap.
On the same page, but we found out that that was a lie and there is a fracture, which I already knew about because I put out videos in December and November with Deja Kelly saying she didn't want to.
This is where the negotiation transforms from a dispute over numbers into a dispute over fundamental principles of how labor should be compensated. The owners are operating from a specific economic framework. Their position can be summarized as follows. We will pay you significantly more money, more than the league has ever paid its players by multiple orders of magnitude. But we will not tie that compensation to a fixed percentage of revenue because this league is not consistently profitable, and we are unwilling to commit to an escalator clause that could bankrupt the operation in a down year. The players are operating from a completely different framework. Their position can be summarized as follows. We do not trust your accounting. We do not believe you when you say the league is unprofitable. We want the same deal. NBA players have approximately 50% of basketball-related income scaled appropriately for our league's revenue. We want our compensation to scale automatically with the league's success because we believe that is the only way to ensure owners are genuinely incentivized to grow the business. Both positions contain elements of validity. Both positions contain elements of self-interest dressed in principle. The problem is that the WNBA's financial reality does not resemble the NBA's financial reality, and the players' demand for comparable revenue-sharing terms ignores that fundamental distinction. The WNBA has operated at a loss for most of its existence. This is not a disputed fact, though the extent of those losses and the accounting methodologies used to calculate them are certainly subjects of disagreement. The 2024 season, driven almost entirely by Caitlin Clark's unprecedented impact on ratings, attendance, and overall cultural relevance, was reportedly the first time the league approached break-even status. Multiple individual franchises continue to lose money annually. The entire business model depends on subsidies from NBA owners and the willingness of wealthy individuals to absorb operating losses as they invest in long-term brand development. This is not the NBA in 1985. This is not the NBA in 2005. This is not even the NBA in 2015, when revenue was already approaching $5 billion annually. The WNBA generates approximately $200 million in annual revenue. The NBA generates more than $10 billion. These are not comparable businesses, and attempting to impose the NBA's labor economics on the WNBA's revenue base is not a negotiating position rooted in realistic assessment. The owner's counter-proposal reflects this reality. Instead of tying compensation to a percentage of revenue that may or may not materialize in any given year, they are offering guaranteed salary increases that put real money in players' pockets regardless of whether the league turns a profit. A $230,000 minimum salary is $230,000 whether the league makes money or loses money. A $1.3 million max salary is $1.3 million whether ratings are up or down. The owners are essentially saying, we will absorb the risk of operating losses while guaranteeing you historically unprecedented compensation. In exchange, we want predictable labor costs that do not automatically escalate based on revenue figures we cannot control. The players are essentially saying, we do not accept your premise that the league is unprofitable, and we are unwilling to surrender the leverage that revenue sharing provides. If you are truly investing in growing this league, you should be willing to share the upside with the labor that makes that growth possible. This is the question that Stewart's public comments raise and fail to answer. The owners have compromised on multiple fronts. They compromised on housing, agreeing to continue providing benefits they had previously resisted. They compromised on salary caps, increasing available spending by hundreds of thousands of dollars beyond their December proposal. They compromised on minimum standards, agreeing to facility upgrades and improved working conditions. They compromised on contract structure, making multiple players per team eligible for maximum salaries. What have the players compromised on? The answer, based on every public statement and every report from inside the negotiations, appears to be nothing. They started at 30% revenue sharing. They remain at 30% revenue sharing. They have accepted some of the ancillary benefits the owners have offered, the housing provisions, the facility standards, the salary increases, but on the core economic issue that Stewart identifies as non-negotiable, there has been zero movement from the WNBPA side. This is not how negotiation works. Negotiation requires both sides to move toward a middle ground. It requires each party to identify their genuine priorities and distinguish them from their aspirational goals. It requires compromise, which by definition means accepting less than what you initially demanded in exchange for securing other objectives. The owners have demonstrated willingness to compromise across multiple categories. The players have demonstrated willingness to accept compromise offers while maintaining maximalist demands on the one issue the owners have identified as a firm boundary. Stewart's statement that the league and owners have been willing to compromise is accurate. Her implicit suggestion that the players have been equally willing is not supported by any available evidence. This is where the negotiation moves from a dispute over economics to a dispute over representation. Brianna Stewart has a lucrative contract with Unrivaled, the 3-on-3 league she co-founded with Nafisa Collier. Nneka Ogwumike, the WNBPA president, also plays in Unrivaled. Collier, another executive committee member, literally owns equity in the league. These three players, Stewart, Ogwumike, and Collier, are the public faces of the union's negotiating strategy. They are the voices appearing in media, the names attached to public statements, the figures driving the hardline position on revenue sharing. What happens if the WNBA season is delayed or canceled due to a lockout? Unrivaled becomes the primary domestic option for women's professional basketball. Athletes Unlimited gains leverage and visibility. The alternative leagues that these executive committee members have financial stakes in suddenly become much more important to the ecosystem. The players who lack unrivaled contracts, who do not have equity stakes, who are competing in Athletes Unlimited for modest payouts and conditioning reps, those players do not share in this upside. Jade Melbourne, an Australian player, publicly stated that she and her fellow Australian players cannot afford a WNBA lockout. Baylor Kelly admitted on camera that she is scared about losing her paycheck. These are not veterans with overseas contracts commanding six figures. These are not players with endorsement deals from Puma and Nike. These are middle-tier players, roster bubble players, developmental players who need their WNBA salaries to survive. They are watching union leadership players who have alternative income sources, who have financial interests in competitor leagues, dictate a negotiating strategy that could cost them everything. Now, it is important to be precise about what this argument does and does not claim. It does not claim that Stewart, Ogwumike, and Collier are deliberately sabotaging WNBA negotiations to benefit their own business interests. That would be an accusation of bad faith that cannot be substantiated and should not be casually made. What it does claim is that the optics are catastrophic. What it does claim is that there is a legitimate question about whether the union's negotiating position reflects what is best for all 400+ players in the league, or what is best for the approximately 30 players have significant alternative income sources and equity positions in competitor leagues. Ogwumike flew to Nashville specifically to meet with players competing in Athletes Unlimited. This was framed as outreach, as listening, as leadership engaging with the rank and file. But what did she hear in that meeting? According to sources, she heard exactly what one would expect: fear, frustration, and a growing sense that the players leading these negotiations do not fully understand what a lockout would mean for the majority of union members. Because when you are Breanna Stewart with unrivaled money, Puma money, and the ability to command top dollar overseas, missing a WNBA season is inconvenient. When you are a second-year player fighting for a roster spot with no off-season safety net, it is potentially career-ending. Here is the reality check that the WNBPA leadership appears unwilling to acknowledge publicly. The WNBA is not the NBA. It does not generate billions in revenue. It does not have a 50-year track record of profitability. It does not command the same media rights fees, sponsorship dollars, or global licensing revenue. Demanding the same revenue-sharing structure as the NBA, when the underlying economics are completely different, is not a negotiating position rooted in market reality. It is fantasy. The NBA's revenue-sharing model works because there is massive, consistent, predictable revenue to share. The league generates more than $10 billion annually. Media rights deals alone account for billions. The revenue base is so large and so stable that allocating 50% to players still leaves owners with billions in profit. The WNBA's revenue base is approximately $200 million. Allocating 30% to players would mean $60 million in player compensation. The owner's current proposal already contemplates total player compensation approaching or exceeding that figure through guaranteed salaries and benefits. The difference is structural. The owners are offering guaranteed compensation regardless of revenue performance. The players are demanding percentage-based compensation that would increase in good years and decrease in bad years. The owners are offering predictability and stability. The players are demanding upside participation and accepting downside risk. Both approaches have merit. Both approaches have drawbacks. But the players' insistence that 30% is non-negotiable, combined with their refusal to identify any corresponding concessions, suggests they are not engaged in the kind of good faith bargaining that produces agreements. The Athletes Unlimited meeting in Nashville was revealing for reasons that extend beyond Ogwumike's listening tour. It revealed the existence of two distinct player populations, with two distinct economic realities. There are the unrivaled players, the overseas stars, the endorsement darlings, approximately 30 to 40 players who have built substantial off-season income streams and can weather a work stoppage. And there are everyone else. The everyone else population includes players like Jade Melbourne, who explicitly stated she cannot afford a lockout. It includes players like Baylor Kelly, who publicly admitted fear about losing her paycheck. It includes players competing in Athletes Unlimited not for life-changing money but for modest payouts and the opportunity to maintain conditioning. It includes players who rely on their WNBA salaries to pay rent, to support family members, to build savings, to establish financial stability. These players are not being heard in this negotiation. Their voices are not the ones appearing in press conferences and media interviews. Their concerns are not the ones driving the union's public messaging. Their economic reality is not reflected in the demand for 30% revenue sharing, because 30% revenue sharing, even if achieved, would not immediately put money in their pockets. The guaranteed salary increases in the owner's proposal would. The housing benefits in the owner's proposal would. The facility improvements and working condition enhancements in the owner's proposal would. The union leadership has decided that these tangible, immediate, guaranteed benefits are insufficient because they do not achieve the principle of revenue sharing. That is a decision made by players who can afford to prioritize principle over immediate need. It is not a decision that reflects the priorities of players who are currently earning $60,000 and wondering how they will make ends meet if the season is canceled. Stewart acknowledged that she does not know if there is a specific drop-dead date after which starting the season on schedule becomes impossible. This acknowledgement is either disingenuous or reflects a concerning lack of familiarity with how professional sports leagues actually operate. There are absolutely drop-dead dates. They may not be publicly announced or formally codified, but they exist in the operational reality of scheduling arenas, coordinating travel, selling tickets, securing broadcast commitments, and hiring staff. Training camps are scheduled to begin in late April. That is approximately 10 weeks from the date of this writing. 10 weeks sounds like enough time until one considers what must happen in those 10 weeks. The two sides must bridge a fundamental philosophical divide on revenue sharing. They must negotiate the specific language of hundreds of contractual provisions. They must draft and review and revise the actual CBA document. They must ratify the agreement through both ownership and union membership. They must communicate the terms to teams, agents, and players. They must open free agency. They must fill rosters. They must prepare for training camp. If there is no deal by late March, teams cannot plan their training camps with any certainty. If there is no deal by early April, free agency must be delayed. If there is no deal by mid-April, the league must either start late with all the scheduling chaos that entails, or begin canceling games. Every passing week reduces the window for normal operations. Every unresolved issue increases the probability of disruption. Stewart said this has gone on way longer than it needed to. She is correct. But the responsibility for this delay does not rest solely or even primarily with the owners. The players took 6 weeks to respond to the owners' December proposal. 6 weeks of silence from the union side. 6 weeks of no counteroffers, no movement, no apparent negotiation. Then the owners submitted a new proposal with significant concessions on housing, salary caps, minimum salaries, and contract structure. And the union's response, delivered through Stewart's public comments, was essentially, "We appreciate the concessions, but we still want the one thing you won't give us, and we're not offering anything in return." That is not negotiation. That is ultimatum. The conflict of interest question surrounding Unrivaled is not going to disappear. It is not going to be resolved by press releases or public statements. It is baked into the structural reality of this negotiation. 3 of the most influential voices in the WNBPA have direct financial stakes in a league that would benefit from WNBA disruption. They may be acting in perfect good faith. They may genuinely believe that revenue sharing is the most important issue facing women's professional basketball. They may be entirely sincere in their commitment to improving conditions for all players. None of that changes the optics. None of that eliminates the perception problem. None of that reassures players like Baylor Kelly, who are publicly expressing fear about losing their income. The union leadership needs to address this issue directly, transparently, and convincingly. They need to explain how their personal financial interests are not influencing their negotiating positions. They need to demonstrate that they have considered recusal mechanisms or other structural protections. They need to show the membership and the public that they are capable of separating their roles as union representatives from their roles as business owners and equity holders. Thus far, they have not done this. Thus far, the response to questions about Unrivaled and conflict of interest has been defensive or dismissive. Thus far, the union has proceeded as if this is not a legitimate concern, rather than addressing it head-on. This is a strategic error. In negotiations, perception matters as much as reality. The perception that union leadership is prioritizing the interests of a small elite over the rank and file will undermine solidarity, weaken bargaining position, and provide the owners with leverage they should not have. The next several weeks will reveal whether this impasse is a genuine stalemate or a negotiating tactic. If the players genuinely will not accept a deal without 30% revenue sharing, and the owners genuinely will not offer more than approximately 15%, then the 2025 WNBA season is in serious jeopardy. Training camps will be delayed. Free agency will be postponed. The schedule will be disrupted. games may be canceled. If this is a negotiating tactic, if the players are posturing for leverage while preparing to accept a deal that provides unprecedented salary increases without percentage-based revenue sharing, then Stewart's public comments are part of a carefully calibrated strategy. She slams the offer publicly while privately signaling willingness to compromise. She declares revenue sharing non-negotiable while preparing to accept housing concessions and salary increases as sufficient movement. She projects strength to maintain bargaining position while knowing that the eventual agreement will fall short of the maximalist demand. The problem with this approach is that it assumes the owners will continue making concessions while the players make none. It assumes that public pressure and the threat of a canceled season will force ownership to abandon their firm boundary on revenue sharing. It assumes that the players have more leverage than they actually possess. These are dangerous assumptions, particularly when the union's membership is not uniformly committed to the hardline position. Baylor Kelly is scared. Jade Melbourne is scared. The players in Athletes Unlimited are scared. They are watching their leadership dig trenches and fortify positions while the calendar advances and the window for a normal season narrows. They are hearing Stewart declare that housing concessions and salary increases are insufficient while they struggle to pay rent on $60,000 salaries. They are wondering if the people representing them actually understand what it means to need a paycheck. Stewart's public comments raise a question she has not answered and may not be able to answer. What are the players willing to give up to get revenue sharing? What concessions are they prepared to make? What compromises are they offering? What movement have they demonstrated? The owners have moved on housing. They have moved on salary caps. They have moved on minimum salaries. They have moved on contract structure. They have moved on facility standards. They have moved on multiple fronts, across multiple categories. The players have moved on nothing. They have stated their demand. They have rejected offers that do not meet that demand. They have not articulated what they would accept in lieu of revenue sharing or what they would offer in exchange for it. This is not a sustainable negotiating posture. At some point, the players must demonstrate that they are engaged in good faith bargaining rather than positional warfare. At some point, they must acknowledge that the owners have made substantial, good faith concessions, and that continued refusal to reciprocate constitutes bad faith dealing. At some point, they must answer the question that Stewart's comments deliberately obscure. What are you willing to compromise on? If these negotiations fail, if the 2025 season is delayed or canceled, the consequences will not be distributed evenly. Breanna Stewart will not lose her home. Nafesa Collier will not miss a mortgage payment. Nneka Ogwumike will not struggle to put food on the table. They have unrivaled contracts. They have endorsement deals. They have overseas opportunities. They have equity stakes and alternative income streams and financial cushions that insulate them from the immediate consequences of a work stoppage. Baylor Kelly does not have these things. Jade Melbourne does not have these things. The players competing in Athletes Unlimited for modest payouts and conditioning reps do not have these things. The developmental players, the roster bubble players, the players fighting for their professional lives, they do not have these things. They are the ones who will pay the price for a negotiating strategy driven by players who can afford to miss paychecks. They are the ones who will lose salary, lose momentum, lose opportunities. They are the ones who may never recover. This is the tragedy at the heart of this standoff. The players most invested in the hardline position are the players least affected by its failure. The players with the most to lose are the players with the least influence over the negotiating strategy. The union leadership is pursuing a maximalist agenda that benefits a small elite, while exposing the majority of the membership to significant, potentially devastating risk. Stewart is right that time is running out. She is right that this has gone on longer than necessary. She is right that both sides need to start genuinely hearing each other. But she is wrong about who bears primary responsibility for this impasse. She is wrong about what constitutes genuine compromise. She is wrong about the economic reality underlying these negotiations. The owners have offered transformative salary increases, unprecedented housing benefits, improved working conditions, and guaranteed compensation that does not depend on revenue performance. They have compromised on multiple issues they previously identified as firm boundaries. They have demonstrated willingness to move toward the player's position while protecting what they view as essential to the league's financial sustainability. The players have offered nothing. They have demanded 30% revenue sharing. They have rejected offers that do not include it. They have not identified any corresponding concessions they are prepared to make. They have not articulated any alternative frameworks that might bridge the gap. They have not demonstrated the kind of good faith engagement that productive negotiation requires. The 2025 WNBA season is now in genuine jeopardy. Training camp is less than 3 months away. Free agency is supposed to open in January 2026, but that assumes a CBA is in place. The operational timeline is compressing rapidly. The window for normal preparation is closing. Every unresolved issue, every unreturned offer, every public declaration of non-negotiable demands pushes the season closer to disruption. The question that will determine the outcome of this standoff is whether the players' leadership can recognize that their maximalist position is not sustainable, whether they can acknowledge that the owners have made substantial, good faith concessions and that continued refusal to reciprocate is bad faith bargaining, whether they can separate their personal financial interests as unrivaled stakeholders from their fiduciary responsibilities as union representatives, whether they can explain to players like Baylor Kelly and Jade Melbourne why missing paychecks and potentially losing a season is worth fighting for a revenue-sharing principle that may not even be economically viable. If they can, there is still time to salvage the season. If they cannot, the wall is coming. And when it hits, it will not be Brianna Stewart who feels the impact first. It will be the players she claims to represent, but appears increasingly disconnected from. It will be the forgotten majority of the WNBA. The players who trusted their union leadership to negotiate in their best interests and are now watching those leaders pursue an agenda that serves only themselves. The clock is ticking. The season is approaching. The gap between the two sides is not narrowing, it is widening, because one side keeps compromising and the other side keeps saying it is not enough. Something has to give. The only remaining question is whether it will be the owner's resolve, the players' demands, or the 2025 WNBA season itself. What the fans think about this mess matters less than what the players think. Specifically, what the 360-plus players who are not Brianna Stewart think. They are the ones with the most at stake. They are the ones whose voices have been conspicuously absent from this entire conversation. They are the ones who will determine whether this union remains united or fractures under the weight of its leadership's maximalist ambitions. The wall is getting closer, the runway is getting shorter, and the sound of negotiations hitting an impasse is about to become the sound of a season slipping away. Stay locked in with my channel, Simply Explained, your home for the truth behind the WNBA headlines.